The number one threat against the United States right now, from DHS and the FBI, is cybersecurity. When you look at the malicious actors, both foreign and domestic, that are penetrating our systems, it's amazing. And now, why is that relevant to you all? Well, because governments control so much data. At the state level, with Representative Gooch, you're talking about marriage licenses, you're talking about vital statistics, you're talking about tax information, you name it. Government at the state level has a wealth of data. You all at the county levels have a wealth of data. Now, some of that's subject to open records. Some of that's subject to being displayed transparently on our websites and et cetera. But securing those confidential documents is extremely important. House Bill 5 that the auditor's office made a big push this year in trying to get passed, and I think did get passed, is going to dictate a lot of the breach notification, meaning if you were susceptible to a cyber intrusion, that you would have to inform the people whose information has been compromised that they have been compromised. Several states, South Carolina had major breach notification in their tax records. A couple months ago, Target, I mean, we all heard about Target and the publicity that happened when so many credit card records were compromised. It's a humongous deal. You know, and the reason why companies like Google and Apple are trading at such exorbitant prices nowadays is because they have so much data. They have so much data. So the 21st century is all about data, and the 21st century is all about trying to get data, and that's where we're seeing these malicious actors that are trying to intrude, even at the local level. And we've seen this even at a school board level, and it's just a matter of time before it comes our way. So I just kind of caution all of you all, think about password protection, think about some of the simplistic things that you can do within your organization to harden your IT infrastructure. Gang activity and heroin. If any of you all have followed recent events in Louisville over the last couple of weeks, you know about some middle school age gangs. Who would have thought middle school age gangs, and yes, I'm talking about 7th, 8th, 9th graders, would have had 17 assaults in a period of one night, would have caused in excess of $1.5 million worth of property damage. It's there. We're seeing trends of gang activity that's going from young adults down to high school, down to middle school. A lot of this is drug related. Heroin, as I mentioned, is an epidemic in some portions of our state. It is the raw form of prescription drug abuse. When you think about Oxycontin and some of those drugs that were a scourge on our state, heroin is really its simplest raw form. And with that comes old gang networks to distribute that heroin. And so I caution all of you all to report that type of activity. If you see it within your state, to local law enforcement, they'll share it with us. But I just put that on your radar screen, that's some of the trends that we're seeing in the state, and it's not good. The earthquake is going to come. And I know from emergency management to Homeland Security, we've been beating on our chest for years and years. We had a national level exercise in 2011 that many of us couldn't actually participate fully in because of all the flooding that was happening on the Mississippi River at that time. But the exercise that's coming up from June 16th to June 20th, called Capstone, is going to involve 7 states in and around Kentucky, your Illinois, your Missouri, etc. It's going to be a major exercise on how to deal with the impending earthquake. Now, none of us are Nostradamus. Nobody can come up here and say when it's going to happen, but it will happen. And the problem is that with liquefaction of the soil, with some of the things that could happen during the earthquake, the river running backwards. I mean, Henderson, they always said Ellis Park was on the Kentucky side of the river pre-1812, and now you have to cross the river to get to Kentucky in certain places. That was all caused by that earthquake. And when you look at the amount of people that are going to be dislocated, I mean, we're actually going to have almost like a refugee issue You know, we watch the news and we see what's happening in Syria and other places where, you know, hundreds of thousands of people have got to be moved, or they're just leaving their community. That could happen. I mean, that is literally a reality because of liquefaction, the amount of infrastructure that would be destroyed via that earthquake. And the other thing, or the other reason why we emphasize that earthquake so much is that if we train to that standard, if we train to the earthquake standard of New Madrid happening, then all of these other disasters that we deal with in our communities are really simple. Because that's the hardest test. That's the hardest threshold for us to get through is the earthquake standard. So I encourage all of you all, I imagine some of you all will be participating at a judge level on that capstone exercise, but the earthquake situation is extremely serious, and that's the reason why we need to train towards that standard. One of the things that I encourage our citizen court counsels to do is to, you know, the old slogan of think globally and act locally. Well, the preparedness message is pretty much generic up here at this global level, but it really needs to be parsed down to a local message. And a couple of things that I would just throw at you is that when we think of a preparedness message for an individual county, we all remember the very successful Smokey the Bear, you know, only you can prevent forest fires. We all think of Meade County, your all's sister county towards the east, and the tornadoes that went through there in '74 that we just had the 40th anniversary of. But to find an incident or a symbol for preparing your people within your own county. And that could be the ice storm that came through here several different years ago. Remember the ice storm. Prepare to the ice storm. But to try to find a preparedness message that's localized, that's specific to your community, to make it really filter in. Make your population really adhere to what they need to be prepared for. And when we mention that, we talk about supply kits, we talk about having a little bit of cash when ATMs don't work, we talk about, you know, food and water for 3 or 4 days. Those are the type of things that we talk about in our preparedness message, but try to find something that localizes or makes that a reality within your own community. Social media is something that I am challenged with. I'm not a Twitter person. I really don't do much Facebook. But any of you all with children know that they're addicted to social media. That's all they do pretty much. Facebook, Twitter, you have these new things, and Instagram, and all these different things. So we have a wealth of our population, and it's just going to continue to increase. You know, the 18-year-olds are not going to stop at 18. They're going to be 28 in a few years. That are always getting their information from social media. And one thing that we've been working with at the state level with KYEM is to really outreach in a social media manner to those young people. I think there's a feeling out there that as soon as we wrap our hands around Facebook, we wrap our fingers around Twitter, that something else is going to happen, or some new technology is going to be pushed out. And that's true. So it's an evolving social media. It's an evolving way that we're communicating. But we have to embrace it, even at the county level, because so many of your county children, young adults, are really learning more from social media than they are from cable news. Learning more from social media than they are from the public library. So embracing that, trying to find a program that works in your county is really encouraged. Another thing that I wanted to mention is old-fashioned communication. When you look at all of us, I guarantee you, I'll bet you $100 that everybody in this room has a cell phone. Pretty much true. Well, the cell phone network isn't made for all of us to be on that call at the same time. And in certain instances, like in 2011, when there was an earthquake in Virginia that affected D.C., the one that the Washington Monument, you know, was being rehabbed, everybody got on the cellular network at one time. And what happened? No one could get a call out. I mean, literally, no one could get a call out. And so when we think about communicating, especially in times of disaster, the cell phone's not going to work. So who's going to pick up the kids? Where are we going to meet at? Who's going to check on mom and dad? you know, these are some of the things to think about. We're so addicted to technology. We're so addicted to just being able to communicate with anybody at any time that we want to. What's going to happen when we can't? When we think about chaos, really. I mean, that's the definition of almost terrorism or chaos, when we can't communicate with each other. So think about, in an earthquake event, how are we going to communicate? And that's one of the things that I stress with the county emergency managers and the citizen board, is to never forget that you do have to have meet-up places, you do have to have backup plans, you do have to have a way to communicate without that cell phone. And that's a foreign concept to anybody that's 18 and younger, because they've never gone without it. So just to think about that as a way to prepare your communities and a message to tell your citizens. The final thing that I wanted just to share with you, and it's kind of a favorite of mine, is that antibiotics are going to kill us. When you think of the amount of antibiotics that are used and treated, not only in people, but in livestock, poultry, etc., it's almost in an epidemic proportion. The Centers for Disease Control say that antibiotics cure bacterial infections, not viral infections. Viral infections are kind of our normal flu and cold, most runny noses, bronchitis, sore throats, etc. But in so many instances, we go to the doctor and we get that Z-Pack. We take those antibiotics for really something that is not necessary. And what has happened over the past, well, 30 to 40 years is that by ingesting so many of those antibiotics, by those antibiotics being given to just about every cow or cattle that's out there, whether or not they're sick or not, we're ingesting so many of those antibiotics that there's super bugs, there's super bacteria that's being, mostly in hospitals, growth in hospitals, but is uncurable. And when you get right down to it, we don't have anything much stronger than antibiotics. There's a few that are only prescribed in hospitals, but the problem is that, and I'll state from the CDC, is that each year in the United States, at least 2 million people become infected with bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. 2 million people. And at least 23,000 of those people die as a direct result of those infections. And CDC has started a Get Smart program on their website. Some of you all may have seen information from local public health departments warning of the overuse, warning of the overprescribing of antibiotics. Because it is something where if we as a people become resistant to any of these antibiotics, I don't know what we're going to do long term, because they haven't come up with anything better. So, like I said, that's a little bit of a whimsical approach on the antibiotics that are going to kill us. But I appreciate your all's time and to share that preparedness message. And that's one thing that, and anytime we go out and speak, is to talk about communication plan, talk about how you can prepare a kid, prepare yourself, prepare your family for incidences that we hope will not happen in our lifetime, but are guaranteed to happen sometime. And so if we train to that earthquake standard, we should be more prepared in being able to take care of ourselves, our loved ones, and our community.